So you will notice that we have some new faces that have joined us. And I'd like to introduce Dr. Julia Milner and my colleague Pratap Nambiar. And I will invite Julia and Pratap to say something about themselves, but just a quick introduction. Julia is a colleague of Poreg's, and she was instrumental in helping us get clear on some of the questions that we were going to be using in the survey, and will actually be working with us closely in more of the analysis and the practicality of how we take this and how we apply this. Julia is actually a lecturer as well at the University of Wollongong Sydney Business School for the Masters in Business Coaching degree, and also works as a management consultant. So makes that beautiful bridge and between the academic world and the very practical organizational world. And so thank you for being willing to join us. And I'd invite you in a minute to say a couple of words. And Pratap Nambiar, sitting to my left, is my colleague that I met in Singapore about 2 years ago.
That's right.
And namaste, Pratapji.
Namaste to you as well.
And Pratap comes to us. We feel blessed that Pratap has joined the Leadership Circle family in the Asia-Pacific region. Pratap brings an enormous wealth of experience in the corporate world, having headed up a couple of very large professional services firms in the Asia-Pacific region, and has lived in many different parts of the world, and brings an enormous wisdom and heart to this work. And it's wonderful to have you join us on stage. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Roma.
I'll invite Julia to please just introduce yourself a little bit, and then Pratap, and then we'll start with the panel.
Well, thank you for having me here. And as Roma was pointing out, so I'm working at that bridging academia and practice, because I think both sides have so much to gain from each other, but often they're acting separately, so that's very important. The other thing that might be important to mention is you are able to tell I have an accent, and usually I let people guess what the accent is, but to shorten the process, it is German. Dear panel members, so one thing you should know about me, or that you should know about Germans, is that we have no sense of humor. So if you do make a joke during this discussion, you do have to say, please insert laughter after here. Otherwise, I won't get it. So part that goes especially in your direction, but I don't know what's happening.
Thank you, Julia.
So much for
Pratap.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. It's a pleasure. It's the first time I'm attending an event of this kind organized by the Leadership Circle, and I'm so impressed. It's been a wonderful day, and I had a lot of things in my mind before I came here in terms of what I was thinking I would actually say here, and it's all blown away. What I can say actually is that I spent about 36 years working in corporates in different parts of the world, and then the last 6 years involved very much in a different kind of journey of discovery and helping leaders to find their own potential and taking them on a different journey. And I met Bob and Roma and Adele and several other colleagues of the Leadership Circle, and my life has changed enormously. It has given me a sense of purpose that I never really had for all those 36 years, and I wish I had started on this journey earlier. That's what I have to say for now.
Thank you. Now, what we normally do is we actually have a couple of questions that I will ask the panel. We run the panels as a very conversational style. And so I do have a couple of questions. And then what we would like to do is to invite any questions from the audience. And I am very conscious again in terms of those non-obvious points of leverage that we have. We actually have. At the break, I checked in with Scott, and at one point in time, we had close to 40 people who were live streaming. So we can't get their questions, but if they're on Twitter, you can certainly send us some of your questions on Twitter. So I would like to open up to the audience, and I would ask that if you do have a question, if you could please stand and speak to the panel, and I will repeat the question. So if you can keep it as brief as possible, that would be wonderful for me. And I will repeat it for the sake of the cameras and for the sake of the panel. And we will take a couple of questions if indeed we are getting any through the Twitter feed. Michelle, our guardian angel here who keeps us on track, is monitoring Twitter for us. So the questions this morning for the panel. What will it take for organizations to realize that development of the effectiveness of leadership, both at the individual and the collective level, is an investment that cannot not be made? Any thoughts?
I'm happy to start. We Germans are also known for our on timing or before timing, so I'm just going to go.
You said you didn't understand
insert
jokes.
Laughter here.
She said, yeah, insert laughter.
So much for no sense of humor.
Well, I mean, as Bob was pointing out this morning, I think there's organization actually can not afford it. So they have to invest in leadership and developing leadership. And I think what we all also know is often people are promoted based on their technical skills, based on their technical capabilities. And they are thrown in those leadership positions. And often these leadership skills, which you can develop, but there needs to be help with that. And I think our organization needs to invest in that if they want to attract high-performing people, if they want to retain them, and if they want to motivate and engage them.
Beautiful. Thank you. Any other thoughts?
I'm just building upon that, Julie. I mean, obviously, many organizations are doing this. So it's not like that no one's not doing this. So many are, predominantly at the individual level rather than the collective level, and that is a significant difference. But if you look at innovation, if you look at technology change, even the last 5 or 6 years, the whole explosion of Internet 2.0 means we're all more connected everywhere, and therefore the collective leadership has to be amplified above that. So the imperative is even stronger than it might have been previously. What will it take is a conversation from they need to change to I need to change to actually we need to change together. And it's that movement of that conversation is what will take it to invest in the collective piece.
Let me give you a completely different take on this, and is based on the work that I've been doing for the last 6 years with CEOs and helping them to understand why they have lost their mojo and why things are not working out quite the way they want it to be. And the thing that galvanizes CEOs and boards and shareholders into action very quickly is when they realize that they're leaving money on the table, that actually shareholder value can be enhanced, and that they are leaving out a great big opportunity to tap into competitive advantage. And that leadership actually offers the single biggest competitive advantage. And if they know how to harvest that, how to harness that, then that translates into serious dollars. Nothing motivates people more than that if you're a CEO answerable to a board and if the board is answerable to a shareholder. I find that there is a great deal in there from a goal congruence perspective, which is a significant challenge that is an outcome of the culture that has been or not been built in an organization. And when we talk about goals, one of the best quotes I've read comes actually from the Gita, which talks about the fact that leaders are not able to achieve their goals, not because they cannot overcome the challenges they face, but because they have actually built a very clear and distinct path to a lesser goal. And that is the challenge. That is the challenge that organizations face in terms of getting that goal alignment and being able to galvanize and motivate people with a common sense of purpose. And when they recognize that it is the collective unleashing of the energies and capabilities of leadership that is going to give them that competitive advantage, that is going to shape the culture, the way things get done in that organization, is what will help to close that gap and for them to realize that it is a business imperative that they cannot avoid.
So I'm hearing you say that some of the shift that enables this and the by whom comes from the core, the senior leaders in the organisation. Wondering if there's anything else that sits in underneath that enables this shift.
I was thinking about this because I posed the question earlier and I showed you the ideal profile, and then I showed you the executive group or the leadership profile of a business that ended up selling the business, right? And I posed the question, why would you settle for this? When you know it, we know it. We already know it. And I think, for me, it goes to what Sengi was talking about, that to really take that on, I have to acknowledge that I don't have it all together. I have to acknowledge that as the leader, and the higher you go, the more the pressure is on to have it all together, or at least appear to. And we also, as the higher you go, the less actual development you get and feedback you get. So it's a very interesting soup for having us kind of not develop. But once I take that on, then I am the problem. And I'm going to be learning about how I'm the problem. And I'm going to be doing that. If we're talking collective effectiveness, I'll be doing that quite publicly, actually, with my team and even with the organization. And there are very few leaders like Jim who will go around and say, look, what happened to me and what do I do about it? That's a level of willingness to be vulnerable and learning that's rare. And so I think there's fear there. It's scary. And that may be bigger than, this is what Keegan was talking about our immunity to change. That fear may be bigger than what we know and our intention. And so we say, yes, we get this. I don't think we don't get this. I think we do get this, actually. I mean, I said how many effective leaders, ineffective, collectively, right? All hands go up. And then I said, when we ask 50,000 managers, what's effectiveness look like? They give us a same picture every time. So I think we actually do know it. Believing we could actually change or being willing to be that vulnerable is another question. We talked about it last time I was here. I talked about it as a hero's journey, as a heroine's journey. Used a lot of poetry. It was a very different presentation than this one. It's not for the faint of heart. There is a restructuring that happens, a metamorphosis, where the old structure comes apart, disintegrates, for a new structure forming up, and in between it's really disorienting. And the stuff that made me successful, the way I define myself as a leader, goes up for grabs. And I'm not sure how I'm going to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, and if Humpty Dumpty's going to get back together again. And that's a lot to ask of somebody in that kind of a position. And whether we know that or not, we intuit it. This is a big deal if we take this on, for me personally and for the organization.
Coming back to that crucible idea again.
Yeah.
Really, yeah.
It has obvious overlaps here. 3 things that I would like to comment on. First of all, in terms of what it would take for organisations to realise that they absolutely must invest in development, collective leadership. There's a worst case and a best case scenario. The worst case scenario is that all the wheels fall off and basically something drastic has to happen. And that's really motivated by a sort of a sense of fear of something has to be done. There is no alternative. And sometimes that's when leadership is removed, and we saw that this morning. The best case scenario is where you're likely to have one, hopefully many leaders, seeing that they're actually part of that sigmoid curve journey. And they need to invest in order to keep developing on their current trajectory and also developing a new curve. The third insight, actually, you've alluded to already, Bob. It reminded me very much of the work of Keegan and Lisa Lay, who I know the Leadership Circle here is going to bring up. But that whole theory of immunity to change is probably the key to why people don't do what they really logically, intellectually know they should, down to simple things like giving up smoking or exercising more or whatever. We know we want to do one thing, but we consistently do something else. And it's a bit like you were saying, Pratap, too. Having a very clearly articulated journey, but towards a goal that you don't necessarily want. So there's a sense of needing to have more insight, needing to have more people together so that collectively you've got more choice, more hope of answering those core questions and more hope of keeping yourselves honest to what you really want to be your true goal. So those are the sorts of things, I think, either a fear of the failure, but hopefully an impetus to become even better.
Yeah, and I really think that it is the nature of how the world is today in terms of how complex, competitive, constantly changing, making it so much more transactional, short-term, the here, the now, getting sucked into the challenges of not today, but the hour, and finding it difficult to reinvent themselves. If you remember some years ago, Tom Peters wrote about this whole in search of excellence, and he talked about customer intimacy and innovation and operational excellence, and that was enough. Not anymore. You know, you need something else, and everybody's trying to figure out what that something else is, and they think that, well, I had the innovation and it's gone. I thought I was good at customer excellence, but it's a whole different level of relationships that needs to be built now. So what has changed? And why is it that what was working so well last month, last year, 6 months ago is not valid anymore? The only thing that you go back to is to be the change that you want to see around you. And that's the starting point. And sadly, a lot of leaders in very responsible positions are still playing the game of trying to put out the fire in the current reality that they are living in without understanding the link between what we talked about all day today, which is the inner game controlling the outer game. And they are still believing that it is the external world that is going to give me all the answers, and that's really where I need to focus, and not really understand that there is something else that I need to work on, which is far more powerful and far more sustainable in terms of giving me the competitive advantage that I'm looking for, which is right there inside me. And that's the way I see our jobs, is to be able to take that message across, which is what we're doing here today. And,
yeah.
you know.
And I think that, you know, both Julia and Porrick, I mean, you know, in the master's program that you are integrally involved in, I'm curious about your insights into leaders becoming far more aware of internally of their role, that their role is to lead, and part of that actually involves being able to show up with a strong people focus. Can you comment a little bit on that?
Absolutely. So coaching itself is about raising self-awareness in people, and it doesn't matter if I'm a professional coach working with people or if a manager, I use coaching skills to lead my people. So that level of self-awareness. And I think that links very beautiful in, and I might open up the question if we should think about leadership not only on terms of a hierarchical level. So yes, the CEO, the top leadership management groups, so important, but also the concept of, you know, vertical leadership. So everyone is a leader in an organization, especially for self-awareness, self-insight, because if I'm, as we talked about today, if I'm not aware of my own habits and cannot improve them, then I'm less effective. So I see leadership maybe also a little bit broader in terms of everyone in an organization is a leader. So.
Going back to the Master's Program, one thing that has been particularly pleasing, so this is the Master Business Coaching in Sydney Business School, part of University of Wollongong. is at least half of people come through that master's degree are actually in leadership roles in organizations and are doing this degree to help them be better leaders, not to become a professional executive coach. And listening to their, I'll use the word journey, and I appreciate it's a cliche in some sense, but listen to the journey over their 2 years of study. What they talk about is they come into the study looking to learn lots of information, models about psychology, etc. They walk out going, wow, I've changed who I am. And I didn't expect that. That wasn't what I signed off for, but that's what I got, and I'm delighted I got that. And when you watch their assessments on the way through and watch the various assignments and watch the interactions through the different subjects, by the time they come out the other end of that degree, they're extraordinarily different people. And they know a whole lot more about content. But the change is at them. And I think that's a really positive view of where leadership is evolving to, when you have quite senior leaders going, I need to go away and actually learn stuff so I can change who I am, even though that wasn't the original intent when they came into it. And
that whole aspect coming back full circle again to intentional leadership. Yeah. I'm very curious. Would you like to say something?
Yeah.
I can see you.
A couple things. One, I don't think we lay out a model like stage development, right, that I went through. When you start to really get that mental model inside you so you see the world through it, it explains a lot. And so what Keegan would say about level 3, his level 3, which we call reactive, or he calls socialized mind, is that you don't yet have a self. The internal self hasn't booted up yet. The self is held by the surround, so you are the sum of the messages and expectations. That's how the self is actually held. So all this language we have around inner development and self-awareness and stuff hasn't actually yet booted up as relevant. And 75 to 80% of adults are functioning here in a world, in a senior business environment that is incredibly practical, and the press of it. I had no idea. I was a loan consultant 15 years ago, right? Actually, probably less than that. We actually started really deciding to sell the Leadership Circle in 2003, so about 11 years ago. I had no idea what leadership demands until I'm the CEO of now a global business. I didn't have a clue, really, of the pressure, the press, the complexity, the demands on the external reality. So you got a reactive level operating system in that world. A lot of what we talk about is irrelevant. And so when I read the question, when you sent it over, I went, wow, good question. As I laid in bed last night with jet lag at 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning, I'm going, wait a minute, the whole frame of the question is they're the problem. How do we fix them? Like there's something they need to get. And it just flipped it for me, and I went, what do we need to get in order to have that impact? What is it as practitioners in this field we don't get that doesn't land the message, right, and ground it? So part of what we've been doing, and part of my talk today is, and what we've been working on hard is, what's the framing around this that actually might connect more? See, we talk in L&OD language, psychobabble to them, right? Business people, and I've spent 10 years in this other language system. It's a very different language. EBITDA, market cap, cash flow management, it's like, it's a very precise language, and a very useful language. But it's the fluency of the people that we work with. So when we go in and talk our language, it's like if I were to go to Japan and speak English and expect to be understood. It doesn't translate. So there's a way in which we need to get that we're entering into a remarkable territory with its own language and its own precision, and find out how to join with that and learn to be good, trusted advisor, business partners. Because otherwise, we're talking like this to each other. And so maybe it isn't that they need to get it, but we need to learn how to really frame this in what we're now calling the core argument that actually does connect. And so part of what I'm excited about with things like the leadership quotient and just a simple frame of effective leaders outperform ineffective leaders. How many agree with that? Great. Every leader raises their hand to that. And the language is deliberate. We don't talk about leadership development. How many leaders need leadership development? Mr. or Mrs. CEO, do you want leadership development? They say no, thank you. Don't need that. Do you want to be more effective? Absolutely. Would it be valuable to you to be more effective? Sure. You're in just the shift of language to effectiveness frame changes the conversation. So we're really working on this, and I credit my partner Bill Adams, who I've mentioned a number of times. He's master.
He's actually watching live streaming right now.
Is he?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to say this earlier, but I was in such a horse race with time I didn't acknowledge him. But a lot of the framing has been a conversation between he and I. I come at it from more the consciousness and structure determines performance. He comes at it from how can I really frame the value proposition in a way that it can be heard by the market. And he's brilliant at that. And so we're working on how do we frame this up in a way that has it actually make sense. And I'm telling you, it's hard to get that argument into you. I was more nervous to give this talk than the other ones. And if those who know me know I sweat these things, right? So because it's taken a lot of work to get that core argument into me, even though I spent 10 years running a business. So I think it's a challenge for us. And we frame the question as if what has to happen with them in order that they get it. And I think it's a both and. There's clearly a both and. And what's the challenge for us to be good, trusted advisor, business partners with our clients?
How do we show up? Yeah. So, if I may, I'd like to invite a couple of questions from the audience. And just before I do that, I'm just going to check with Michelle, and we're tracking. Have we got anything? Nothing? Okay, so we've got no tweetsvilles out there. Any questions from the audience? Who would like? Yes, please. We'll get that one first. Thank you. Sorry. Yes, please. Thanks.
It's more of a comment, and it's really based on what you said about the language that you use.
Can you all hear? Okay. So hold on a minute. Can I turn this? Can I? Thanks, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
I'd just like to offer a perspective on what you said about the language that you use. Having lived in China for the past 3 years and having used this tool in a global law firm there, I wonder how the man who is on every Chinese yuan note what he might have thought about the term "the power of the collective." Just a perspective. The Chinese find much of the language of leadership development very difficult to understand. And I'm really grateful to you for having translated it into Mandarin for the colleagues that we took through the process. But it's certainly something to consider, particularly in a market that is right front and centre of the world at the moment.
Just a comment. I mean, really great question. And as a company, we're on a front end of a big learning curve around the very question you raise. Cultural differences, language, how we frame it, all that, and even the model is going to get, looked over. And so we're finding that it plays really well around the world, and we got to get into that more deeply. So it's a great question. And the framing that we're using is very Western framing, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Can't apologize for that, because that's where we come from. And we do this work all over the Asia Pacific area at very high levels, and it gets a real it's very highly received. So yes, I agree.
There's a both end here.
Yeah,
Julia, I'm getting something.
Really nodding my head. Absolutely, the culture perspective comes in with those elements. Even if you think just about coaching is a Western approach, or was originated in the Western world, and just how do we adapt that? Yes, coaching does work, but you need to be very mindful of that. I think what's interesting, though, even if the cultural perspectives might be different, the problems seem to be very similar. So if we look at the engagement of the workforce, so slightly different in different countries, but approximately 1/3 is highly disengaged. 50% are just there, spending their time, and we have a small percentage who's actually really positively engaged. So the problems seem to be similar, but we do have to absolutely take that into consideration. I think it's a very important point.
Thank you. So I saw there was another question. There's a gentleman just with the green shirt. Thank you. Hold on, it'll come. Hold on just a sec. Can you get this mic up, please? Try it again.
It's not working.
Okay, thank you.
I was interested with the daily habits research in understanding, because obviously the people who participated were up towards the integral level, the degree to which, I know the research wouldn't answer this, but I'm interested in your perspectives, to which it's applicable to others who are...
The degree to which the research is applicable to others who are not necessarily in highly creative, highly integral. Is that what your question was, David? Okay, thank you.
I think it's very applicable on a number of levels. I don't think anyone in that 25-person group said, hey, I'm an integral level leader. In fact, I think they would not even talk about that. It's not a term that comes there. What they talk about is, how do I make sure I am leading really, really, really well? And they talked about, in the closeout interviews, when we asked them, when did the habits start forming, how did you choose those habits, some of the stuff that we didn't share with you today, a few things emerged from that really clearly. Habits they've been playing with for a number of years, and they finally landed on a set that worked for them, and they keep that being consistent. So it's not like they've been doing this since they're 20. It's a process over time of trying, see which works, that didn't quite get right, I've changed my role, let's try something else. So it's a continual reflective loop and a reflective process. And a reflective piece on, as I've been getting better in my habits, guess what? I've been getting better in my leadership effectiveness as well. So there's a piece that flows into each other. When we asked them around, the effect of those habits for other people, so, they talked about these habits are simple, but what they get me to do is to be consistent every single day. That's the key word. I'm consistently intentional every single day. And we heard earlier on about, the more you go up, the more you're going to need to go down deeper. This process helps them to go down deeper and come up faster. And therefore, I think it applies at almost every level. Roma, would you have a comment?
Well, and I think that it comes back to my personal experience in working with leaders who have profiles that have got incredible shapes to them, and they're all beautiful, and all these leaders are doing their intention to show up in the best way that they can. I mean, I don't think I've come across a leader who really doesn't want to show up intentionally in some way. And so that we know through the leadership circle itself that, and through the work that we do with leaders, is that the evolution of the internal operating system normally doesn't happen by accident. And even if somebody there's a trajectory through some kind of tragedy or through some major crisis in life that shifts our perspective, and it never ever goes back. For example, a death or a major, failing of some kind. That the center of gravity, when the center of gravity at the creative mind or the self-authoring mind, as Robert Keegan would say, or at the integral or the self-transforming mind, that center of gravity and staying in that center of gravity doesn't normally happen by accident. It happens because there is a regular, reflective, and active practice. It's the both and the either or and the both and. So what we found in the research is that whilst we could find that there were 3 common themes, in actual fact the practices that leaders had, that they could interchange them in order to be able to get those kinds of benefits. So this isn't happening by accident, and we also know, and if many of you would have listened to Bob's presentation a couple of years ago, that there are some practices that are related to the journey from reactive into creative. And what we believe that we're looking at here is we've got some practices here that we can start working with clients that can actually assist them on that journey into high-level creative and then into integral. Yeah?
Maybe, Roma, to add to that, I think what is important that you see the themes and the clusters, but I think people really have to think about how to tailor that for them on an individual level. So even amongst those top 25 leaders, when you do something, or whether you like swimming as an exercise, or the walk, or how you do mindfulness, you actually really need to integrate it into your daily habits and make it very tailored for yourself. So I think there's fantastic indication where to go onto, but I think people also need to remember that, you have your own life, and it fits into that life. That's where you need to build in those habits. Otherwise, you just stop doing it after a while as well.
Beautiful. Now, I am very conscious that we made a commitment to you that we would finish at 1:00. And unfortunately, we won't have time for any other questions. Well, what I would like to do is to ask you to warmly put your hands together to thank members of our panel.